Growing up, I spent many summers in the Ozarks. At an early age, I fell in love with its rich history of lawmen and bandits. Over the years, I've learned much more about the Ozarks, including its dark and mysterious lore. Join me, Blasky, as I dive into this lore, the myths, superstitions, and urban legends of the Ozarks. This is Ozark Mountain Lore. On a previous episode, we looked at three of the Ozarks' most well-known urban legends: the Albino Farm, Hatchet Man Bridge, and the Spook Lights of Joplin. I encourage you to go back to part 1 to learn more about these stories, if none of these names ring a bell. It will, as one listener told me, make you think twice about taking the back roads at night. For this episode of Ozark Mountain Lore, another round of urban legends. This time, we will look at a few of the smaller and lesser-known stories that will leave you questioning just how much you know about what lurks in the hills of the Ozarks and what might be right under your feet. For our first story, we travel back to Devil's Den State Park that can be found in the northwest part of Arkansas. Before it was turned into a state park back in the 1930s, it served as a hideout for bandits on the run and Confederate soldiers looking to hide out and ambush the Union Army. Aside from being used for its strategic advantages, it also attracted people from all around to take in its unique geological features. It wouldn't be long before you started to hear some of the legends that surrounded this mysterious den. For starters, where did the name Devil's Den come from? Was it because it was the haven for criminals before the Civil War? Or was it because it was the literal home of a demonic creature lurking in the dark for its next victim? According to the lore, there was a rather large snake that lived at the bottom of the den. The local townspeople took to naming the creature the Devil, and the cave his den. Hence the name Devil's Den. There also has been claims by visitors and hikers of apparitions following them while visiting the park. One man even said that a spirit had tormented him and his friend while they were camping one night, making loud noises and yelling at them to leave now. Many have also claimed that while camping at the park that they would wake up in a haze, feeling like they had lost large periods of time, but remaining eerily calm. That was a similar feeling that Terry Lovelace and his friend Toby had after their alleged abduction by an unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAP as they're now called. It kind of makes you pose the question, are others being picked up out of the park by visitors from another world? Who knows? Just interesting that so many people, all there at different times, all experiencing the same feeling. If you are planning a trip to Devil's Den State Park, be mindful of your surroundings. You never know what could be hiding below you or above you. For our next urban legend, we travel north back into Missouri to a favorite summertime destination for thousands every year: the Lake of the Ozarks. Much like Table Rock Lake in Branson, the Lake of the Ozarks was man-made, created in 1931. The Lake of the Ozarks was a result of the Bagnell Dam being built across the Osage River in order to create hydroelectric power for St. Louis. Because of this, many small towns and villages were forced to relocate. Many of these small towns had their own cemeteries, and according to official records, there were around 2,800 grave sites, but record keeping was sometimes poor, and locating these grave sites was a challenge. Only a little more than 1,100 of the graves were located and moved, leaving more than 1,500 unaccounted for. Remember that the next time you find yourself spending a fun weekend swimming in the Lake of the Ozarks, you might be swimming above a very large cemetery. If the thought of 1,500 corpses lingering below your feet didn't creep you out, what about the thought of finding human remains buried in your backyard? If you travel just 40 miles north of the Lake of the Ozarks, you will find a wild and creepy story of a man who made a discovery that to this day, no one can seem to explain. In April of 1934, a man by the name of J.D. Crane, after purchasing the land, made the decision to where he wanted to build his house. He found a large mound that had a great view of his land, and on top of it was 5 large white oak trees. What lied below those trees was something he never would have expected. After cutting down the trees, he began to till up the land, and that's when he hit something hard, like stone. He dug out the remaining dirt, and by doing so, revealed large flat stones that appeared to be covering something up. JD and others removed the stones, and below them, 7 skeletons, accompanied by 7 petrified hearts. And one of the skeletons, it was measured to be over 8 feet tall, a monster of a being by any standards. Human skeletons could be explained, but the petrified hearts? Did they belong to the human remains buried in these tombs? And what of the giant? Were they all part of some kind of sacrifice or ritual? So many questions, but none that have been answered. Crane counted the rings on the trees and learned that the trees were at least 100 years old. So how long have these bones been buried here? The closest thing to an answer that we have is a record that showed that the land was previously owned, and a map marking out a private burial site. Maybe it was just a private burial site for a family at one point. But why the petrified hearts? J.D. Crane never turned the bones over to anyone. Instead, he claimed to have reburied the bones in a different location somewhere on his 340-acre farm. Some since have tried to debunk his claim, saying the location of where the house claimed to be, no tree of that description would be possible. Did Crane make it all up? But why? For our final urban legend, we look to a hollow nestled in between Branson and Springfield named Goodnight Hollow. The year is 1903, a time when it wasn't all that uncommon for kids to be found in the woods, hunting for small game like squirrels and rabbits. So when a child named Ukiah Clemens was seen carrying a dead animal, it wouldn't be as shocking as it may be today. That was until you watched him take a bite out of the poor defenseless animal that wasn't always dead. Ukiah was described as being a skinny, malnourished-looking boy with green eyes wearing a raccoon-skinned hat. He was one of 8 children. His father, a blacksmith with a terrible drinking problem. His mother, an unstable woman herself, who would often take her issues out on whatever child was closest. They were poor, and the children were often left to go hungry. This would explain Ukiah's desire to gnaw on small animals. One day, while chewing on a half-dead snake, Ukiah's father snatched the boy up and tied him up behind the house. From there, Ukiah would suffer his father's wrath and was beaten with a bullwhip, leaving Ukiah with a permanent stutter. As the legend goes, Ukiah disappeared not long after his 8th birthday. Many people in the local town felt terrible for the family, but always suspected something foul to have happened. I found 3 different possible explanations for Ukiah's disappearance. The first being that he simply wandered into the woods and never came out. The other said that he died at the hands of his father and a bullwhip one night. The family took him into the woods to bury him so that way no one would find out. And finally, and probably the darkest of them all, suggests that hunger overcame the young boy and turned him into a cannibal. Horrified by his crimes, his mother chased him into the woods, then later hung herself from a tree just outside their home. It wasn't long after Ukiah vanished that the rumors and superstitions began to rise. People would often claim that they would feel an overwhelming sense of dread anytime they would venture into the woods. Many of them went on to say that they would have visions of past abuse that they suffered at the hands of their own parents, or relive some of the terrible acts they may themselves have carried out on their own children, followed by a powerful sense of guilt. For decades, hikers who decided to stroll through the woods of Goodnight Hollow have told stories of red marks and bruises suddenly appearing on their body, becoming worse the farther into the woods they would go. Some hikers made their way in, but never made their way out. Did they just get lost? Or perhaps they were taken by a feral child driven mad by hunger, feasting on a stray traveler or two. There have been a lot of reports of missing people in that area over the years. Coincidence? Urban legends are fun, aren't they? This collection of out-of-this-world tales leaves you questioning everything you know about the world you live in. Sure, they seem far-fetched and outside the realm of possibility, but still have enough realism to them that leaves you wondering, could they be true? On the season finale of Ozark Mountain Lore, witches. And just in time for Halloween, we will look into some of the Ozarks' tales of witchcraft, curses, and the power to raise the dead in the middle of one of the Ozarks' bloodiest battles. It's all coming up on the season finale of Ozark Mountain Lore. For more content, follow Around the Ozarks on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X, or go to AroundTheOzarks.com and subscribe to the daily newsletter so you don't miss when new episodes drop.